We are back. Season 2 of the Wearable Takeover podcast. Folks, did you miss us? Hopefully by now you have tuned into all of season 1, where we featured some of our wearable founders and partners within the ecosystem. And hopefully you also listened to some of those episodes that launched in December so that you are prepared to take 2023 by the reins. But you know what? I am so excited because we have someone featured on today's episode that you all must know. You will hear this name. And if you are ever lucky to be in his presence, make sure you give him a high five for me, okay? Because I just think the world of him. And so today, to help kick off season 2, we have a Midwestern. Although folks from Detroit, they just like to say Detroit, right? But we have a fellow Midwesterner, Paris Dean. I'm so excited about Paris. Paris is the quintessential problem solver and serial entrepreneur, and he started his first business at 11. And so I like that, that he has that story of starting entrepreneurship at the age of 11. We do some stuff like that here at Wearable Tech Ventures. He was actually the youngest Black design engineer at one of the big 3 at 20 years old. And he had an exit to a Fortune 10 company at 22. He had clients in 10 states and 3 countries at the age of 25. And check this out, folks, he managed a $300 million real estate portfolio at the age of 27. I'm not done. He was also nominated for the Forbes 30 Under 30 Award at 29 as the founder and CEO of Sparen Homes, which is a first of its kind real estate marketplace that actually uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to make home ownership more accessible. And I think that's something that's really going to interest some of our Gen Zers as well as the millennials. And I know people hate those labels, but there's so many articles about that age demographic and some of the plights that they face as they even think about home ownership. But I'm not done, folks. I'm really excited because I actually met Paris when he was featured as one of the 12 founders in the inaugural Techstars Equitech Accelerator in Baltimore. So when he's not working, because he's been taking some naps, he's been working on it, okay? But he does work a lot. You can find him at somebody's sushi bar, mentoring, listening to Prince, working to make the arts accessible to inner city youth, and using his platform to create opportunities for the next generation. Aren't you happy he doesn't do all of that at the same time? Folks, I want you to give a warm virtual welcome to Paris Dean. Woo, Paris. I'm bringing out my pom-poms, Paris. I'm so excited to have you here.
You have them on the side of the screen, ready to go.
Yeah. And Paris, you were a guest as well during our virtual hackathon in the summer of 2022. And so shout out to our partner, We Love You Baltimore Times, that began to feature some Black founders and especially Black founders in the Baltimore area that were doing amazing things. But Paris, you've come a long way. But you know what? Before we get into all of the success stories and technical stuff, what's your favorite Prince song?
Oh boy. That's a hard question. I feel like it's a trick question because you can't really have one because he's got so many. He's done rap, he's done rock, he's done R&B, jazz. I didn't like any of his jazz stuff. He's just done so much of everything across so many different genres. So it's really difficult to pinpoint one, but if I had to choose one, if somebody said, I'll give you all the money that you're raising if you choose one Prince song.
Wow.
I would have to say is Baby I'm a Star.
Oh my gosh.
So many years. That was I always said if I ever was an athlete, that would be my song that played when I came out.
I love it. That song has a special meaning for me as well. My line sister that passed away, that was one of the songs that we played at her ceremony. But I love it. And Prince, by the way, has a special place in my heart. I promised folks, for you, those of you that are out there, if you're not familiar with the East Coast is known for seafood, and Baltimore specifically is known for crab, which I do not eat, but I do eat lobster. And so I recall that the day I found a place where I could go and get lobster rolls, I promised Paris I would take him to go get a lobster roll to celebrate graduating from Techstars. But the day I found that restaurant was actually the day that Prince died. And I left my office that day because I didn't feel right that day. I didn't know what was going on. And as soon as I got to that restaurant, that's when I found out Prince died. So anyway, we'll have to go there and partake of some Baltimore cuisine now that you're
Mhm.
here, because you're living here now, right?
I'm here.
So you moved from Detroit to Baltimore as a result of being in Techstars. And so for our listeners that they've been catching up and ramping up. So we've been training them, building the foundation. But many of them may not know exactly what is Techstars and what's
I
the
don't even know what
advantage of.
Techstars is.
You don't even know what Techstars is. Okay, well,
No.
tell us about your Techstars experience and what made you apply to the Techstars Equitech Accelerator.
Do you want the real answer or the answer that
Bring
won't get?
it on. We're real here because again, we are dealing with populations, and when I say populations, I'm talking about, a lot of people say BIPOC, Black, Brown, female, underrepresented, differently abled founders that are often excluded from many
Mhm.
opportunities to advance and grow their businesses. And oftentimes, Techstars is a platform that helps to revolutionize or put a lot of these companies on the covers of Forbes and Fortune and Inc. So, what made you say, I'm going to apply?
Okay, so there was nothing in particular.
Okay.
There was one person.
Oh,
I know, right? So you know Monica Wheat, right?
Um, that name sounds familiar. Did she come on as like one of the
Yeah,
managers
she was the
later?
managing director. Yeah.
Okay.
So Monica Wheat is probably one of the highest ranking managing directors in Techstars.
Okay.
Um, and so she'd been on my Facebook for some time, and I wrote this one really interesting post about why I thought Michigan, more specifically Detroit, wasn't the best place for young Black people who are trying to start companies in the creative space.
Wow.
And because I'd been an international business consultant, so I traveled around and met all these different people, and I wrote a post about it. And because she's from Detroit, she didn't feel negatively about it. She just wanted to know why I felt that way.
Hmm.
Um, and so after talking to her about all of what I've done and my other projects, she took an interest in Sparen. Well, what would become Sparen because it had a different name.
Okay.
Um, and so we talked about it, and she's like, I might have something for you. And so she pulled a U, and she wouldn't tell me what it was. She just kept saying, well, maybe I have this big thing coming up. I don't know yet. So a couple months later, I see an article because they had announced that she was going to be the managing director for the accelerator in Baltimore.
Okay.
And so once she confirmed that she would be accepting the job, she reached out and said, I think you should apply. And me being me, I said, absolutely not.
Because you are one that goes against the grain.
Yep. And I knew that venture capital, it from the outside looking in, it's a space where they want you to go against the grain.
Hmm.
They tell you they want the crazy founders, the thinkers, the people who, question everything. Um, but after having dealt with it for some time, I realized that it's not exactly the truth, um, especially for pattern matching. But that came after I got into Techstars. Um, so we had some more conversations, and I told her no again. And then she put on her black lady hat, and you don't tell black women no. And she put her foot down, and I said, okay, well, fine, I'll apply. And so I did, and I got in.
Another Black woman saved the world.
Yep.
Shout out to Monica. I so appreciate that. And there's a lesson in that. So, for anyone that is aspiring to develop a solution for the world via a startup, or perhaps you are already involved in one, or just professionally, just building your career, monitor what you're doing and what you're saying on social media. Paris used it for a greater good, to get a message out. And I love that. I love that about you, Paris.
Because you
Okay,
never know who's
so
looking.
You never know who's looking. All right. So with that being said, so you apply, and then what
Mhm.
happened?
And I messed it up. Um, listen, it was my first time applying. I didn't know what I was doing. They basically wanted me to recreate my pitch deck in this other platform, and so it was a learning curve to get used to that process.
Okay.
But she told me what went wrong, and she told me that I had time to fix it, and then I fixed it. And when I fixed it, of course, it went through. Um, but in that process, it was interesting.
It was interesting. Okay, so that it helps to have an advocate, and I guess that is a kudos to Baltimore Equitech, understanding that when you talk about building an equitable city or an
Mhm.
equitable platform, it helps to have people understand the applicants and providing that guidance and nurturing them along the way. I'm not sure if all of the other branded accelerators, have that internal support. But I served as a mentor throughout the process, and that's how I met you. And Paris, you were my top choice
Uh-oh.
from looking at all the companies from day one, even though you weren't literally in the wearable tech vacuum, if you will.
Oh, look, look, look. I got an Apple Watch.
Ah! A wearable enthusiast. But there's a lot of stuff we can't tell on this podcast, you know what I mean, because we talk about innovation and development and stuff that hasn't come to fruition yet. But I have no doubt that you all will see Paris and some of our other platforms and future conferences related to wearables, because there's so many things that align. But Paris, as I mentioned, you were my number one choice. Just from the way you presented, the solution you had. So tell us a little bit about Sparen, and tell us a little bit about your journey you know, to success, and what was that success for you?
Well, I'll let you know when I get there because I'm still
Okay.
journeying. Um, but just thinking back to the application, the
Mhm.
Techstars application, um, just me being me, I was going through picking apart the application process. So I actually took apart the software and made suggestions to the company that built the software for how it could be better. So
I
I was
love it.
applying, but also consulting the company at the same time.
I
So
love it.
that was a lot of fun. But thinking about that as I go through different processes or different industries, I apply that same thought process. Go through it, understand it, pick it apart, figure out how to make it better. So
Yes.
going all the way back to what I was doing when I was 11, I was just basically designing things. So that's all that I've done my whole career. It's just design things. But design isn't always like a thing. Of course, this really nice looking phone was designed, but design is a process.
Yes.
And so I tell people all the time, you got to have an algorithm. You have to live by an algorithm. And an algorithm is just a set of instructions or a
Yes.
code, some instruction manual, whatever it is, you have to have one, or else you will lose your way in whatever it is that you're doing because you'll spend more time. And so, um, getting messages on Slack. But as you're going through the things that you're going through, it's important to have that because it leaves you more time to focus on what you're doing rather than how to do what you're doing.
And I'm a proponent of design thinking.
Mhm.
And I think that there's still a lot of opportunity for established companies as well as startups to employ that process. And what I often find is that people fail because they do not think about the end user or the customer
They
first.
don't. They think about themselves.
Yes.
That's not
And
always good.
it grinds my gears when people are saying, "Oh, we're launching this or we're launching this app," and I'm like, "Did you use any feedback you've ever collected from your customer or end user?
And
You just thought it was going to be cool."
that got me in a lot of trouble going through Techstars.
Oh, tell us about that.
It did. But I got to answer your first question.
Okay, there's so much here. I love it.
Going back to what I was doing when I was 11, I had basically, and you can't tell anybody because
Okay, but we're on this podcast, then where we have
I forgot. Okay. So, I
founders in
mean,
4 continents.
okay, I guess you can tell people. Um, but I was just taking apart computers and I was using one of those air canisters with the red hose, or with the red nozzle that you use to clean out your keyboard.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and I was spraying out all the dust. And so at 10 and 11, that was my version of computer repair.
It's so cute.
So I went from that to understanding what each of the parts in the computer did. And so then I started an actual computer repair company when I was a teenager. And so then I went from understanding what the different parts did to understanding how the parts worked. And so then I just started taking apart the actual software and the programs that were on the computer. And so then that led me into basically like removing viruses and helping old people with their computers and removing cookies and teaching them how to use email. So just understanding the different parts of computers. But then from there, I, my granddad, he's a real estate investor. Well, he
Okay.
was a real estate investor. So he would
In Detroit, right?
no, this was in Flint because I was born in Flint.
Oh, okay, in Flint.
Yeah. hmm and so he would buy houses and then renovate them and then sell them or rent them out. Um, and so he was also a computer programmer kind of person. He basically wrote the software that the city of Flint used to manage their school lunch delivery program.
Are you
Oh,
serious?
yeah. So
It's
all the
amazing.
schools in Flint, they basically use his software to map out, logistics and all that stuff.
It's
Um,
amazing.
so from watching him, I decided that, all right, I want to figure out how to use computers, basically how to meld or mesh computers and properties. And so he made the fatal mistake of buying one of those 3D rendering programs
Oh
for,
wow.
for architecture. And so that was all I needed. And so I basically got obsessed with it. And I decided then that I wanted to own an architecture firm that designed houses and everything in them. So
It, what was the name of the black architect that was in California?
there's a lot of them.
Oh well, do you remember that movie that came out during the pandemic? Nia Long was in it, and it was an awesome movie, and it almost didn't make it to the
No.
big screen. But they were highlighting the black family that um, paved the way in developing real estate, and how they also worked with the black architect, and then like they ended up losing it doing a deal with
Oh, the banker?
somebody at a bank. The banker. Thank you,
Yeah,
thank you, thank you.
I've seen that movie like 10 times.
So it's like it's your grandfather number one was ahead of his time, and so that's a phenomenal story. By the way, I want to be a part of this documentary whenever it's done on you. Seriously, I think this is amazing, and so to have that example of your grandfather making waves and the city using um his brain power, if you will, to make sure the children could eat at lunch, and then you are inquisitive and learning how things work, which I
hmm
think is a good point for our listeners. Never stop thinking. You have a brain for a reason.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, people think they're thinking, but they're not. In many
No.
cases, they are reacting. So in 2023, all of you, take some time to think, and you might be like Paris.
You don't want to be like me. Um, but anywho, so I decided that I wanted to start an architecture firm that designed houses and everything in them. And so probably from maybe 13, 14 to 19, I designed probably 100 different properties and several hundred pieces of like individual or unique furniture. So no two
So this
pieces.
was using that program, the
No, that
3D.
that was the thing that got me started. So I used that one to design the properties, but then I realized that you could like download different furniture pieces. This was back in like 2003, 2002, 2003.
Okay.
Um, so you could download different pieces to use in the program, but I didn't like any of them. So I started designing my own and figuring out how to basically import the ones that I designed into the program so that all my stuff, so that I could design houses and everything in them.
That's
Um,
genius. What did you use to
everything,
develop?
everything. Listen,
Wow.
I just patched some. Listen, I did some of everything. I got a bunch of free trials. I got, I listen. It was just a lot. Um,
So wait, I have to create a visual. So were you like that kid that was in your room on the computer all day and you were designing homes? You weren't necessarily playing video games, but you were designing
yeah,
homes.
yep, yep.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't help myself.
Okay.
So
Major interest fueled by that. Did you work with Legos at all as well?
I did a lot. Yeah, I had a lot of. I mean, not so much when I was a teenager,
Hmm.
um, because my problem is once stuff gets easy for me, I lose interest.
Genius archetype. Hmm.
Yep. So Legos, they got to be too predictable. Because I got to the point where I could put them together without reading the instruction manual.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
for me, I'm like, well, what's the point? It's not exciting anymore. Um, so getting back to the point, I went from designing furniture, well, designing houses to designing furniture to import into the CAD program that I was using to solely focusing on CAD because
Wow.
I'm like, I really enjoy furniture design, like creating things because my dad was sort of like a handyman. And so my granddad would buy these houses and then my dad would help him renovate them. And so they would, design cabinets and they would sketch them out. And then I would take them from the sketches and design them in the program. And then they would take them from the program and use them to create the actual cabinets that they would put into the houses.
Oh wow.
Um, so it was sort of like a whole cycle for me, just learning about the different parts of design, and then actually being able to design like like carpentry cabinets and tables and stuff that they would make. So all of this was between like 13 and 16.
Oh my gosh. True genius. Okay, so you're impacting the family business, if you will.
I was trying to.
So what happened after that?
So after that, I decided that I really, really, really just wanted to focus on like furniture.
Okay.
So chairs, tables, cabinets, that kind of thing. I was obsessed with IKEA. And
Okay.
so I really liked IKEA, one, because it was really simple designs, but then two, the way that they were packaged. They were sort of like the pioneers of what you call flat pack, meaning that
Mm,
you could basically disassemble it and put it in a small box. Um, and so I moved around a lot when I was a kid because of my mom's job. And I'm like, moving furniture is always the most ridiculous process.
mm.
So if you can design it better when it's being built to be able to be taken apart and quickly packed up and then reassembled somewhere else, I'm like, that's a thing. So I started focusing on furniture, but more so designing it in a way that it could be taken apart and put back together later. And so me with my brain, I'm like, well, why don't I just send this to the people who are already doing it? So I started researching on the internet. We had dial up, so I could only be on the internet for a
With the
certain amount.
AOL CD?
Yep.
For all you youngins that don't know about that or
They
don't
don't
know about
appreciate the
touch
internet.
tone phones. Yeah.
Yep. So I did that, and I ended up getting an offer for a job at IKEA.
And how old were you?
16.
16.
Yep. But I didn't tell them how old I was. Yeah,
So you had an email address and
I
what
found it.
did you contact headquarters and say I have these suggestions and they're like, "Okay, we need to hire you."
Yep. I found the CEO's email address. I found his secretary's email address.
Wow.
And then I found maybe three or four other people in the C suite, and I just started sending them stuff. And maybe a week later, they came back and they were really impressed by the stuff that I had designed. And they offered me a job. So here I am, 15, 16, with this internship job offer.
I love
And
it.
I'm telling my mom, like, I got to leave school because they want to hire me. And she's like, but you do realize you're 15, 16, right? And I'm like, but what does that matter? They told me that I could come. And she's like, do you know where you have to go? And I said, overseas.
Are you serious? Oh my
She's
goodness.
like, absolutely not. You're no.
So you turned down a dream offer for
Right.
internship overseas with IKEA. And so there's another lesson for all of those that are listening. This is why in our platform, we develop solutions to problems we face every day. And Paris is an example of when you are someone that can come up with solutions, solve problems, doors will always open, even in other countries.
So that didn't work out, but I still, I was still passionate about furniture design and just design in general. So I went from designing furniture to just designing all sorts of random stuff. Um, but then going back a little bit, as I was coming out of middle school, going into high school, I had a jewelry design company.
Okay.
So my cousin was a professional baseball player. And so I would start designing random, bracelets for his wife, necklaces, and she would of course wear them to the game. And then
So wait a minute. So you were like a Simone Smith before Simone Smith. So what kind of materials were you using with this jewelry?
just like the beaded bracelets,
Okay.
gemstones, but not, not the fake stuff, like the real stuff.
The real
Um,
gemstones. So like were you sourcing this from the US or
I was
overseas? Okay.
everywhere. So I
Wow.
really got into supply chain management because I would have orders for bracelets and they would be delayed because the materials were coming in from Indonesia, China,
Hmm.
Nigeria. And I'm like, well, can I just buy them straight from the factory rather than waiting for them to get, made at the mine, then shipped to the other place and then shipped back? And so I really got into supply chain management, in late middle school, early high school.
That's
So all
amazing.
that stuff came in handy later on, and I'll tell you why. So going through middle school and high school, of course, I was just focused on design and creating things. But at the end of high school, I'd had this massive portfolio of designs, some architecture, furniture, random car parts, because I would literally just sit there and just design anything that was in front of me.
Wow.
And so going into college, I had moved back to Flint because there's a school there that had an accelerated engineering program. It
Okay.
was Mott Community College. And so I started at the College for Creative Studies, which is in Detroit, which is a very large private art school. But they focus on like industrial design, product design, fine arts, that kind of thing. So I started there, but they were $980 a credit hour. And I'm like, listen, this is way too much. So
Hmm.
I transferred from there to Flint. And I got to Flint and ended up becoming the teacher's assistant, basically. And so, of course, I was showing my design teacher my design portfolio,
Wow.
and unbeknownst to me, he was sending that portfolio out to people. So
Really?
I'm sitting in class one day, and I get a call, and I asked the teacher. I said, "Hey, can I go out in the hall and take the call?" And he said, "Sure, go ahead." So I get out there, and I answer the phone. And you ready?
Who was it?
So it was basically they said, "This is so and so from General Motors Human Resources Department. We got your portfolio from a trusted source. We would like to know how much. Well, first of all, are you looking for employment? And how much do you want us to pay you to come work for us?"
How much? Wow.
So,
So
mind
name
you,
your offer.
I was like 19 at the time.
I love it.
So I told him because I had never had a job before. So I told him, I'm like, all right, $8 an hour. She laughed at me. She had that same face. She said, "No, Mr. Dean, that's not enough." And I'm like, wow, $8 was my highest offer. And then I said, all right, let me add two to that. And I said 10. And she laughed at me again. And she was like, definitely not.
You needed
Oh,
a lesson from Bosom of St. John.
yeah. She said, so what we'll do is we'll start you out at 15, full benefits, all the perks and whatnot, but you have to move it back to Detroit. And I'm like, well, my mom lives there. So I can be there like in 2 days. And so she said, no, you got to go through orientation. So long story short, that's how I got to become the youngest Black design engineer at Cadillac.
Wow. Okay, so a phenomenal story. Again, you need a documentary. I totally believe in that. I want to be one of the executive producers on it. But while you were designing these homes and furniture, so age 11, moving on, did you ever go to any supplemental like summer camps or
No,
summer instruction, or was this totally just you and your dad, your grandfather?
it was me. And I tell everybody, like, I don't even have a college degree today, because ev- literally everything that I know, I taught myself because I
Uh-huh.
learn at a much faster pace. And whereas it might take, so speaking about the CAD program, in high school, what I didn't tell you is that I ended up becoming the CAD teacher in high school.
Wait a minute. So what? The teacher was sick one day and you just took over?
So the teacher got fired,
Okay.
and they couldn't find anybody who knew the software better than me. And so I'd had a relationship with the dean of students.
Okay.
And so his name was Mr. Hawthorne, and his daughter, her name was Miss Hawthorne. And so she was teaching a computer class, and the class might have been an hour long, but I'd finished my work in probably the first 10 or 15 minutes. And
Wow.
so what I started doing was bringing my own design program from home, and I hacked through the school's firewalls and I installed it on the computer. And so in the gap between me finishing my work and the end of class, I would just be sitting there designing, stuff in school. And she had an issue with that for whatever reason.
Oh,
Um,
really? She had an
and
issue. Yeah.
yeah, and
Hacking
so
through the
I would
firewall.
time her laps because she would take laps around the class just to make sure everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I gotten so into this one particular design one day, and she got behind me and I didn't know it. And my fake friends, I thought they were my friends. They didn't tell me that she was coming.
You learned about that early.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there and she's watching me design stuff. And rather than being excited that I'm designing stuff, she gets upset and she sends me to her dad. And so she thought I was going to get in trouble.
Oh,
And
wow.
basically, he was like, "You got two options. You can either get suspended or you can help me figure out how to make more of you."
Smart man.
Yep.
Smart
So,
man. I think that's a lesson for all educators. When you have an outlier in the best way possible, such as the example of Paris, put that talent to use and encourage that talent, motivate that talent versus reprimanding them.
yep. So he said, "But I'm only going to give you one option because clearly you've got too much talent. You figured out how to hack through the school's firewall. You installed your own software, and then you're really good at the stuff that you're designing. So it's like that's too much to just be upset at, but you got to work it off." And
Wow.
so rather than suspending me or giving me detention, he said, you get to drop that class because clearly it's no good for you. And so now we're going to challenge you. And
Wow.
so I was a freshman at the time, freshman, sophomore, but he put me in the senior level computer aided design class. And so they had like maybe a 500-page workbook that was supposed to take the whole semester. I did it in like 5 weeks.
5 weeks?
Yep. Went
So were
through,
you working on it like day and night?
it was my thing. I was having fun.
Yeah.
So I ended up finishing all the stuff, and then the teacher in the class made me his teacher's assistant. So I was in like the 10th grade helping seniors understand like how to use the CAD program. And so um, from there, that happened again in college with the whole, me becoming a teacher's assistant thing. Um, so that played a big role in, of course, me building out my portfolio, understanding all the parts of CAD, and then getting the job at GM.
Wow. Okay.
So I left that part out.
Okay, so another gig. So your talent will make room for you if you use it, if you put it to work, and if you figure out how to solve problems or
Yep.
create making good trouble, right?
Good trouble.
Wow, Paris. Okay, so Steve Jobs had nothing on you.
No, pretty much.
Nothing on you. Being in the Midwest. Okay, so becoming a teacher's assistant, making your own way through school, becoming the teacher. Okay, so let's talk about this exit because
Mhm.
oftentimes when I'm talking to founders, and I talk with and I coach not only wearable tech founders, but also other founders, but about 70 to 80% of my time is in the wearable tech category. Oftentimes we ask them at the very beginning about the end. Are they looking at the end? How do they want to get out of this business, or what do they want to do? Um, so tell us about that exit. What was the process? And a lot of people talk about exits, and they talk
Mhm.
about the number, but I really want to know, like, what were you feeling during that
I was
process?
excited because I had created this thing that solved a particular problem for me. So if you
Mhm.
haven't noticed, like throughout the pattern throughout my entire career, I guess whatever you want to call it, is that I don't have any patience. I don't like waiting for things. I
Okay.
was, starting businesses at 11. I was designing cars at 19, 20. So I'm like, I don't believe in waiting for things. And the number one thing that drives me crazy, even to this day, is waiting for other people
Okay.
because I move really, really quickly.
Hmm.
If I get to a point where I'm ready to do something and I can't do it because there's someone else slowing down in front of me, it drives me crazy.
Wow.
So I've started creating systems that remove the other people. So
Wait
I
a
can
minute. This is legendary, and for a lot of business owners, whether you're a startup or business owner or whatnot, when we talk about the challenge with hiring or finding talent, I think you might want to, contact Paris as a consultant if he has time.
listen.
Help you overcome those challenges, right? I,
So, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I want to hear about this.
Oh, so if you think about that, the number one, well, it's two places where you have to deal with other people or wait for other people. One of them is driving.
Hmm.
You got traffic,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is shopping.
Okay. Explain a little bit more.
So for me, as you can probably tell, I'm sort of organized. I go into a store, I have my list. I only want to get, maybe five or six things, enough for maybe a day or two, and then I go home. So I'm the king of the express checkout lane.
Okay.
At the time, the self checkout lane, express checkout lane didn't really exist.
Okay.
So
Were
you go
you?
to,
Are you the reason we have that today?
I don't know.
I was going to say you
I
might
might be.
be. Did you
I
write
might.
someone?
I don't know. But so I'm sure you've been into a Walmart or a Publix or whatever big box grocery store they have.
Yes.
And you know how they have 15 or 20 checkout lanes?
Yes.
Only like three of them will be open,
If that.
if that. So now that you know my shopping pattern, I go into the store, I get my stuff, I'm ready to check out. But I couldn't check out as fast as I wanted to because there was somebody in front of me.
Hmm.
And so this person would have 50 to 100 different things in their grocery cart. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I call this person, you got to have a buyer persona. You have to understand your customer.
Okay.
And so I've created this customer persona for this specific customer, and her name is Susie Homemaker. And
Tell us about Susie.
Susie Homemaker is a stay at home mom with 2.3 kids. She goes grocery shopping once a month. And because she goes grocery shopping once a month, she's got to get everything that she's going to need for the month in one trip. You do not want to get stuck behind Susie Homemaker if you're me. So,
Yes.
what I did, I'm standing there in line, like fuming. It's steam coming out of my ears. My hair is melting. And I'm looking at my phone and I'm looking at my cart, the little handheld basket. And I'm looking back and forth. And then like the little light bulb came out. And it's like, why can't I just pay for stuff from my phone?
Hmm.
So I ended up creating an app where you can scan things from your phone and pay for them, and then it generates the same receipt that you get from from the cashier.
Did you sell it to Giant? Are you allowed to tell that?
Listen, somebody's got it,
I know. Oh, wow. This is so exciting.
but
So you're the one.
there's only one Fortune 10 grocery store out there.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. I was today years old when I learned that, folks. And he's
Mm-hmm.
so amazing. Paris is so amazing. There's so much he's done. That is wow.
Then they bought it and screwed it up. So now I still have to wait in line.
So okay, there's a couple of lessons there. Number one, buyer persona.
Yep.
So
I understand the
understand.
customer, the problem, how many people that problem impacts, how much money they spend trying to solve that problem, who the other competitors out there are that are trying to solve that problem, all the fundamentals as they call them.
So I got to ask a question, Paris, because you had an innovative idea, and sometimes, especially in today's climate, some of our innovators might be afraid to approach that big box store and share their idea for fear that they might steal it. So, how
Oh,
did you overcome that to the point where you were able to sell your app?
because I was more excited about the solution
Mm,
than I was, and plus it was just me being completely naive to the fact that people stole things.
okay.
So I just, you know, dove into home plate head first. So I wasn't really thinking about that. Um, and it ended up happening. They liked it.
Wow.
It took them a while to get back to me because, of course, big corporations. Um, but yeah, they liked it, and it was one of three things that I was working on at the time.
Okay. I love it. All right. So you knew you had a solution. You were passionate about what you were doing. So
Because
even if
still hate
something negative happened, you figured you would have won because you would get out of that checkout line away from Susie Homemaker.
Yep, because like I said, that wasn't the only thing that I was working on,
Hmm.
and me being a little less humble than I should be, like I forget better stuff than most people think of,
Okay.
and so I'm like, if I lose it, it's just one. It wasn't like the biggest thing in the world for me. It was just a solution to a problem.
See, folks, this is why you need to attend our hackathon platforms. And if you don't know what that is, make sure you listen to that other episode here on Wearable Takeover where we explain that. Because we do provide skill sets so that you can develop mobile apps and develop other
Mhm.
uh, technical pieces and obtain technical skill sets. You have a living, breathing example on this episode that has done so many amazing things. And the great thing is that our minds are not limited if we don't limit it, right? We have so much potential if we just allow ourselves to look at the world around us, identify problems, come up with solutions, and make it happen.
Yep, that's what happened.
So that was your exit. So you just sold it, or did you license it?
That was it. That was that was the end of the road for that thing. Because remember, once stuff starts to get easy for me, I lose interest in it. And so because I was juggling three things at the time,
Hmm.
I was excited to have the extra money from that thing to work on my other things. So I got rid of that thing and started working on the sister side for it.
Okay.
And so the sister side for it was the exact same process, except in restaurants.
Okay.
So, you order your food, you got to wait for the waitress to come and take your order, or the waiter. And then they go to the kitchen, and then they give the little scribbled note thing to the
Hmm.
kitchen. And then somebody in the kitchen takes it, and then they got to cook it, and then they got to send it out. It might be something wrong with it. So I started designing a whole process that cut out everybody. And I'm like, I'll just order it from my phone. I'll
Yes.
scan the little code on the menu. And so that was my other thing. So I used to go to a lot of restaurants because I was a consultant. All I did was meet people at restaurants.
Hmm.
And I'm a pretty simple guy. I like chicken nuggets and french fries and lemonade. And so there was a lot of different things, items on the menu. and restaurants don't have pictures on the menu.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking at my phone and I'm looking at the menu and I'm looking back and forth and I'm like, wouldn't it be great if I could take a picture of the menu and then it shows me pictures of the things on the menu? And I'm like, why do I got to wait for somebody else to do it? I just do it myself. So I started creating that version of the app where we put a little QR code next to each item on the menu, and you take a picture and it pulls up an individual web page of the item or the dish, and it gives you pictures, it gives you reviews, it gives you chef notes, basically a platform where the restaurant can show you or communicate what this thing is. And that's when I started doing consulting for my first big client. So my first big client was the Westin Book Cadillac Hotel in Detroit,
Wow.
and so um, I was working with them on the whole development, but there was a restaurant on the ground floor, and so I started working with the owner of that restaurant, and he basically gave me the restaurant and said, "Do what you want with it." And so I used his restaurant as sort of like a pilot to start developing that app.
And did you sell that app or you?
No, I got bored with it because so that was like the very first thing that I did as a consultant.
Okay.
And from there, it sort of did the hockey stick that they always talk about.
Hmm.
And I started getting more exposure to different people. And this was a $200 million development, not the app, but this hotel. So I basically had carte blanche for the hotel and I could do anything that I wanted to do. So because that was Detroit's only first and only 5-star hotel, American Idol was a big thing at the time. And so American Idol came
Yes.
to Detroit. I did not go on American Idol, but I got to hang out with all the judges, and Jennifer Lopez was there and Keith Urban. And so all the celebrities, and anytime there was a concert in Detroit, all the artists and celebrities and just whoever. Uh, I met Michael Bolton. I had macaroni with Michael Bolton.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't want to say I lost interest in it, but there were much bigger fish in the ocean for me than just focusing on this one thing.
Okay.
Um, so I just started doing lots of other things and meeting new people and more clients. And one thing led to the other. And I started getting more clients in other states and other countries. I got a few billionaires as clients, and I met the director of the FBI. It was a lot. I had a lot of fun.
This is amazing. So, Paris, I I know we got to talk about sparing and some other fundraising tips for founders, but I think we need to even have you come back for an episode for our founders that are developing multiple streams of income and talk about how to leverage their expertise as consultants and what that process
Ooh,
is.
don't get me
Uh,
started on that because I might hurt somebody's feelings.
oh, well, I think that's important, but we definitely have to come back to that. Again, you need a documentary. So, you've had all these different lives and ways that you've impacted cities, billionaires, etc. And then you funneled some of that funding into Sparen. Is that how that worked?
No. Well,
Okay.
yes and no. Um, so all the way up until Sparin, I'd never raised any money.
Okay.
It was all me, as they call it, bootstrapping.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I would take money from clients, and they would basically tip me more money so that I could have money to put into my thing. Um, but outside of that, like I'd never raised any money, and so getting to Sparin at the end of my consulting career, I was managing lots and lots of real estate.
Okay.
Because two of the clients that I had met while, of course, at the Westin in Detroit, um, there were two black guys and they owned very sizable real estate portfolios. And so I was basically bouncing back and forth between the two of them because one of them, he's an old guy. He was the former tax assessor for the city of Detroit. So he would just buy up hundreds of properties, hundreds of vacant lots when they would come up for auction.
Hmm.
Um, but he would buy them in his name. And so I was going through the process of helping him move them from his name into different LLCs
Yes.
under a holding company.
Hmm.
Because the problem was he was getting pummeled like dozens of phone calls every day from people wanting to buy his lots, and they would come by his house and his restaurant. And I'm like, why did you put them in your name?
So
So
rule
I start,
101, folks, if you're buying real estate, additional properties,
yeah,
make sure you form an LLC, and it could be the address of that property, and you could
different
call that.
LLCs, one property per LLC. Because if you get sued or if somebody slips on the sidewalk and they sue you, worst case scenario, you lose that property, not all the ones in that LLC. But
Good,
that's,
good
I'm not
know.
a tax professional. I can't tell you what to do.
So one property per LLC. Okay, great.
Yep. So just helping them move their properties around. I would help them basically package these properties.
Hmm.
And I found out later that the technical term or the title for that position was an asset manager. And
Okay.
so I would identify properties within the portfolio that were underperforming, identify properties outside of the portfolio that we could sell or swap. There's a lot of land swapping going on.
Hmm.
Um, and so all of that was at 27 and 28. And so I got to the point where I started to get really good with the nuances of transactions.
Hmm.
And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I couldn't find one, so I created one.
And hence the platform Sparen, right?
Yep. That's where Sparen came from.
Okay. And so tell folks, what is Sparen? Can they access it? Can they use it now? What's going on?
So Sparen, you ready for this? Well, you told them when you gave them my
Well, I
introduction. I
mean,
thought you were
we've
talking
been
about.
talking. They came through your whole life, so they might need a
Oh,
reminder.
got it. So long story short, Sparen is a person-to-person real estate marketplace that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to digitize and automate real estate transactions. So simplest one line, it's Amazon for real estate.
So for real estate agents, should they be worried?
Um, See, what had happened was they should have been, but I figured out how to incorporate real estate agents only because they're training my artificial intelligence for me.
Okay.
So, they're training the AI and the ML. And so they're actually helping me out a lot.
So folks,
So,
don't fight tech. Work with tech.
yeah.
So that's a good thing when you have. And let me just call it out here: when you have a black founder, black founders tend to operate differently, especially those that just have a real conscience. We know that we're going to develop something for the greater good. And although we know what is happening in the innovation ecosystem, where the jobs we see today will not be the jobs that we see tomorrow or the year after that.
Mhm.
But prepare us to incorporate the professionals into this process. That says a lot. That says a lot, not only from your advantage of gaining data, but also making sure that one, they're aware that they know what's happening
Mhm.
and inviting them into the space, which is
Yeah.
important. So folks, if you say, oh, I don't do tech, I don't do anything with tech, you do every single day.
Yeah.
So you need to adopt it and learn it. That's just the end all be all.
Yep. So that's what Sparing is. Um, I built it out. I built out the first, or as they call it, the MVP,
Hmm.
which is minimum viable product for people who don't know what that means. It's not most valuable player. It's more than one person on the team because black founders, they're like, I'm the only person. It's got to be me. And I'm like, listen, you're not the MVP. The product, the company is the most valuable, or the customer is the most valuable player. They're the most important person. So, to that point, and circling back to what we talked about earlier about the customer personas and
Hmm.
tying everything together, I built out the MVP because I was the customer.
Hmm.
And I figured if I'm moving millions of dollars in real estate, there's got to be other people.
Yes.
So I created it. I went out, I did the research, interviewed lots of customers, talked to lots of people, uh, started, testing it out with them. And 72, roughly 90 days later, we had 112 million in sales.
How much?
112 million. Because,
In how
it's real
many
estate.
days?
72, less than 90.
72 days.
Mm-hmm.
How many sales?
$112 million. That's GMV. So you measure the productivity or the effectiveness of a marketplace or marketplace businesses in what's called GMV, which is gross merchandise volume. And so if you dig through that, it was just 362 transactions or 362 people.
Wow. So how did you know who to go to? And I think this
Okay.
is important for founders. I'm asking this not only because your story is interesting, but founders, as we navigate this next realm of life where the economy is changing, where some investors may be pulling it back and waiting on you to fail so that they could buy you at a cheaper price, right?
Mhm.
How did you identify your customer? And apparently that was a, a major key to your success in that 72
Yeah.
days.
Because, like I told you, I was the customer. So I knew where we hung out at.
Okay.
And a big portion of the reason why I created this program was because real estate agents would get in the way. They're
Hmm.
just an added, well, I don't want to say an added cost, but for the seller pays the 6%. So if you sell your property for $1 million, 60,000, that's $60,000. It's a lot of money.
Hmm.
That's a car, that's a down payment on another house, that's a couple pairs of shoes. I don't know what kind of shoes you wear, but it's a lot. So understanding that, I'm like, how do I get to the customer? How do I get to
Hmm.
people who are buying and selling these properties without needing an agent? So then I started to understand the MLS, and agents have to pay to access the MLS, and the MLS is nothing but a big giant Excel spreadsheet that's connected to a map. And I'm like, there's got to be another place where people who aren't, because you can't get your property on the MLS
Hmm.
if you don't work with an agent. So I realized that these people who don't use agents, they're not on the MLS, which means they've got to go somewhere else. And so I just found that somewhere else. And that somewhere else at the time was Facebook, Craigslist, newspaper ads, and these people are called they're categorized as FISBOs, for sale by owner.
Hmm.
So I just went to the source and wrote up a little blurb with a link to my MVP, and I just copied and pasted over and over and over again, and I sent it to them, and that's how I got to all those sales.
That's amazing. So what's in the future for Sparen?
But oh boy, so right now we've got like $2 billion in our transaction pipeline. So
Wait,
going back,
say it again for him. King B out here, right? Is that what you said?
2 billion. Yep.
I love it.
So going back, that's not the amount of money that we make,
Right.
because our revenue is essentially between 0.75 and 1.5% of the total transaction volume. So if you we'll just round it up and say just 1% of $2 billion, that's the amount of money that we stand to make from these transactions. That's called a take rate, because it's the amount that you take from the transaction. Um,
Can you
so
imagine
we've got,
people trying to figure that out with this new math? I'm
hey,
sorry.
that's why I simplify it. So we've got roughly $2 billion in our transaction pipeline. We're working on partnerships with the Department of Defense. We just signed a partnership with the largest Keller Williams brokerage on the East Coast. So now we've got approximately 575 agents that'll
I love
be
it.
doing stuff in the platform for us, which means we don't have to go out and work for it. We
Yes.
just take a small percentage of whatever they get. So it's more money for us. Um, we've got distribution and we've got supply in roughly 9 states. We're getting ready for our big launch coming up in mid-January, early February, basically first quarter of next year. And we're raising money.
And you're raising money. I love it. I love it. All right. Um, and so if folks are interested in your platform or want to talk to you, how can they reach you?
I would not advise talking to me because I'm not a talk to person. I'm just playing. But no, they can go to the Sparen website. So, okay, so here's the fun thing. I bought a really interesting domain. You ready?
What is it?
It's Sparen.homes. That's it.
Sparen.homes. I love
Yep.
it.
Or SparenHomes.com. But there's a sign up page there now because it's a lot of stuff going on behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing our second beta. We're onboarding clients and building out more pages. So the house is being built while people are moving in.
I love it. All
But
right.
I got to tell you why I got in trouble going through Techstars.
Oh, okay. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm
Tell
gonna
us
tell you.
this because it's getting back to the founder and going through the whole process.
Yep. So I got in trouble going through Techstars, and this is one of the reasons why this is the cherry on the top.
Okay.
So my slogan or my mantra going through Techstars was trust over traction.
Mm,
And that breaks the entire venture capital model
mm,
because they were telling me, you need to go out and get customers. You need to go out and force people through your platform. And I'm like, but these people, my customers, are spending two, three, 400, $500,000 in one transaction.
mm-hmm,
This is the most emotional and the largest purchase of the average person's lifetime. They do not rush to make this decision.
mm-hmm.
If they're going to use the platform, they need to be able to know that they can trust it. And so we basically spent a year gaining people's trust. And so we started converting that trust into traction. And now that's where the $2 billion in transactions came from building the relationship, that trust with our market, our customers.
Go with your gut. Relationships are everything. And that's one of the areas that Paris and I bonded. As far as developing relationships, doing things that works for you versus
Mm-hmm.
what has worked previously for masses, especially masses that don't look like us, right? Our
Yep. That's the
experiences
whole
are
pattern
different.
matching thing.
What was that?
Pattern matching.
Yes. I'm so proud of you. I say this all the time. Not that he needs me to say it, but I am incredibly proud of you, your example, your model, your mindset, and making sure that everyone's included. And then also your heart to give back to the community because that's important. And that's one of the things that we value here within the ecosystem. And we tell our founders, you don't just take, this is a cycle where we
Yep.
are investing in everyone in this ecosystem. So, Paris, before we go, because we're going to have to come back, and I just love talking to you. This is absolutely amazing. Founders are going to be faced with some different type of circumstances. I don't know if it's going to be like, the pandemic. I'm just going to say different types of circumstances. And you were on the tail end or in the middle of the pandemic going through Techstars, right? So you bought, you sold, you've been incredibly successful, not just one time, but multiple times in your career. What advice can you give to founders as they face this unknown?
It's going to be hard because even with all the success that I've had and all the stuff that I know and all the stuff that I've done, I still get beat up. Not
Hmm.
beat up, but they give me a hard time. They give me a harder time because referring back to pattern matching, I don't look like the pattern. I don't look like the successful pattern that you see in venture capital. I don't look like Evan Spiegel. I don't look like Mark Zuckerberg. I don't look like Elon Musk. I'm not a young white guy. And so no matter what I tell these people, no matter what I show them, they still give me a hard time. Like I had one person say, "Did you really come up with this? Who do you work for?"
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
So it's important to have, to know all the KPIs and to know your numbers in and out. You got to have your business model. You have to know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers and you don't need to have a story to go with your numbers, you need to have your numbers first and then the story later. Because you only have maybe 20, 30 minutes with these people before they're on to the next founder and they're on to the next idea. So you got to know your numbers and you have to be able to present them in such a way that holds their attention and makes them think about you in the next meeting and the meeting after that. Because if not, you'll just be one of many.
One of many. And we need you to stand out like Paris stood out for me during that.
Probably because I'm tall.
Oh, stop. We were virtual on Zoom. And I think I recall you had on, was it like a t-shirt with like a mock
It was.
suit? See, folks, that's how he stood out. I remember that, and
Business
it's
in the
been
front,
over a
party in the
year.
back. It was like a mullet, but I had on a black hoodie with a print of a shirt and tie on it.
Look, see, folks, he stood out. He
Yep.
stood out. And he did not present like everybody else, but
Mm-mm. Even to this day, I don't. I
he was
refuse to.
quiet, he was confident. He had a quirky sense of humor as he was delivering. And I was like, he knows his stuff. And some people were turned off because of it, but I was like gung ho, like,
Those people are miserable now because they made investments and those investments have failed, and they're looking at me like, "Hey, big head, what you doing?" And I'm like, minding my business.
I'm so excited for you, Paris. Oh my gosh. So I have to ask this, and I know folks, I hope you've been enjoying this. I just love talking to Paris. I could go on and on and on and on, but we're going to have him come back for another episode, and hopefully we can have him in person as well for our youth, because we will be in person this summer. We would love to
Oh
have you,
yeah,
Paris.
definitely. I do mentoring. That's my thing. I just picked up a new kid yesterday. Well, he picked me up. That's kids find me and they're like, "You're coming with me," and I'm like, "Where are we going?"
I love it. So we'll okay. So Paris, we're excited to have you work with us this summer. But ultimately, what do you want your legacy to be?
Uh, I don't really want one.
Okay.
Um, I would like to leave the world a much better place than I found it. Because I mean, somebody's got to live here after me.
Hmm.
So, when you got people coming over, you don't want them to see a dirty house. I learned that from my grandma. So
Yes,
I always try to leave things better than when I found them.
absolutely. And that is not only things, but people, situations. Paris, it is indeed an honor. We're going to schedule you again, and maybe we'll do a fireside chat with our founders and then publish it later, for the podcast platform. But again, tell folks, where can they find Sparen and or you if you want them to find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Paris, like the city, Dean, as in Jimmy Dean, sausage guy. Because it's funny because I have an uncle named Jimmy. That's how I have to tell people. They do not forget me.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we'll ask about that family lineage later. But so LinkedIn, and then again, the website.
Sparen.homes. Or if you're more traditional, sparenhomes.com. Have to get both of them.
I love it. And folks, you will be reading about this genius for years to come. Thank you so much, Paris. We appreciate you. And folks, isn't season 2 off to a fiery start? Make sure you listen to the announcements as we close out, and we'll see you for the next episode.